Hello, everyone. I'm Irina Baker, a spiritual self-awareness mentor. And here I am with a wonderful person, gorgeous lady, and my dear friend for many, many years. Her name is Steph Frazier, and she's going to tell us her story, how she uses and applies divine guidance science in her life. And this story, actually, dramatic story, I would say, in my opinion, right? A little bit on the sad side, but at the same time, uplifting, touching, inspiring. I got goosebumps. So we're really going here. And I know it will benefit you in your life because we don't just look at the signs, we actually practice them. Everything about my teaching is not just theory, but it's actually implementation. And that's what we're doing here. All right. Without no ado, right? As they say, Steph, you many years ago, we won't count how many, when we first met, you were a muggle. And by muggle, I don't mean anything bad or offensive. All I mean is a muggle means the one who doesn't know about spiritual reality or is not interested in it, right? So many people have their physical reality around them, but they're not really interested in spiritual things. So you were that muggle a long time ago. And what happened when first time I introduced science in your life? And actually, I do remember that I was just sharing my own science. I didn't even try to sway you in any shape or form, right? I didn't make you believe in science or anything like that. But so how did it start for you with the divine guidance science?
First, thank you for having me. And yes, as far as the signs go, I was watching you day in and day out, and you weren't forcing it on me. You weren't trying to get me to believe what you believe. You just wanted to show me. And I saw you, even something so simple as a bird coming by, it meant something to you. It spoke to you. You would come and you had to show me. Or an alarm would go off and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a sign. Or we would see certain numbers and you're like, look at these numbers. These numbers mean something. This is a sign. And I was like, I want these signs. And finally, I started asking for signs. But I asked for them to come to me easily because I wasn't getting them. They were in front of me, and there was probably a million of them. And my example of this, I will share in just a moment. I wanted them so bad. I wanted to know. I wanted to know that I was on the right path. So I just asked. I don't know who I was asking at the time because I was not quite understanding what the knowledge that you had, but I wanted it. I wanted a touch of that. So I just asked the universe, my angels, and I just said, please help give me signs and make them clear so that I know. My favorite my favorite sign that you ever gave me was whenever you came running up to my office. It was all windows and there was a trailer right in front of my desk out on the street, and you were like, oh my gosh, look at that, you have to see that. I literally didn't see it. I was like, what are you talking about? And you're like, you don't see that? It's huge. And it was a tree trunk about as big as a car. And you were like, that's the root of the problems. That is the root of the issue that I'm dealing with right now. And I was, at the time, it didn't resonate with me. However, about 11 years later, it finally came in, and I was writing about it for another video that we did, and it all kind of came to me. Like, I got that message 11 years ago, but it didn't make sense until that day that I was thinking about it. And the issue that I was dealing with at the time, my roots were literally going away on a trailer right in front of my eyes.
Uprooted. Because the roots are the spiritual problem has roots and they're inside of us. So when we're ready to release, or we're already in the process of releasing, we could see that sign with the trunk that is dead already. The tree is not alive anymore. So the issue is no longer needed or wanted inside of us, right? And the uprooted roots. So that means the whole thing is going away, not just the top of it, right? But the
Yes.
whole thing, including the roots. How cool is that?
Yes.
And
And
And just a second, there is another teaching point because I wanted to pinpoint that. And a teaching point here is divine setup was such that I introduced that sign long time ago, right? 11 years ago to you, when it didn't resonate to you at that time. You didn't know anything about it. And by the way, that trailer with that tree was removed. The trailer was gone after we got the sign. So I don't remember. I don't know if you remember that, but usually that's a teaching point for everybody. When the sign is received, when the message is conveyed and you got it, the sign disappears. So the trailer was there until I had to see it, and obviously I had to show it to you. So then the trailer and with the tree fulfilled its purpose, and it was gone and then the street was clean, so to speak, clear without the trailer. And later on, 11 years later, who would think that you would remember this, right? But you did.
It's just beautiful. It's beautiful whenever you open your heart and your mind and you're willing and ready to accept. And that's what you have to do. You have to be intentional about what you really want. And if you really want signs or you think they're not coming to you easily, you have to ask for it to be easy.
It's nice for you to talk like this right now, right? But we also know that you have resisted for some time. So tell us a little bit about that. This is so perfect because you finally figured out what you needed to do to open up to the science. And that's what you were sharing with everybody. But you did resist. So when was the point or what kind of point it was when you suddenly started seeing signs? Because I know you get floods now. You get flooded with signs, no problem anymore. But it was a problem before. So where was that point of transition?
I think it was very early on, but I wanted them so bad, but I was trying way too hard because I wanted them, but I didn't really even know what to look for. And I was trying way, way too hard. So I would see a pin and I was like, what is this pin? This pin has to mean something. What is this? Or a sticky note. And I was like, oh no, it's a sticky note. What does this mean? But whenever you just relax and really listen to your inner voice, and that's what I had to do, was just relax and stop forcing it, because pretty much anything that you force is going to turn yucky. So if you just let it flow naturally, it will come to you as long as you have an open heart and an open mind.
Speaking from experience, right? These are not just words. This is a real life experience. Thank you. And the next question, okay, let's go to the story. So how do we start with the story? So go forward, go with it, and share the signs and the whole situation, because it was dramatic, and how you cope.
It was traumatic, but there's also a lot of beauty in it. So whenever before I tell the story, whenever I first started thinking about divine guidance, I always thought it just had to do with meeting people. Like it was, like whenever you meet somebody and you have that instant connection, but that's not exactly it. For me, it's whenever I hear that voice and I pay attention, that small little voice that tells me exactly what to do. So what had happened is my father had just recently passed away, and I was driving from Texas to Missouri to try to make arrangements while I was driving. My son was doing all the texting for me, and I was making arrangements as I'm driving and crying, like just releasing. But we got to Missouri, had our meeting, and my family, of course, we were all struggling. I'm the next to oldest of 7 kids. And we were just trying to make plans, like trying to get everything in order. And the night before the visitation, the funeral director had called me and said that their minister had canceled. He got very sick and he couldn't perform the service. So I don't know anybody down there. So I was like, okay, well, do you have a backup? And he said, well, we do, but he's out on vacation out of state. And I'm like, okay. So I said, well, do you have anybody else in your back pocket? And he said, I can try to make some phone calls, but if you have anybody, that would be great. So I called around to everybody in my family. I called some of my dad's friends, and nobody was really taking the bait. So I said a little prayer and I got this voice that said that I needed to do it. So I am not a public speaker. I get very nervous in front of big groups of people. So I just decided to start jotting down my thoughts of things that I wanted to say. So I did. I just started jotting it down, and it was very unorganized, but I got the words on the paper, and it all came straight from my heart. But before I started doing it, I just said a prayer, and I was like, please help give me the right answers, the right words, the right message that I need to portray to honor my father. And the day of the funeral, I actually sat down and typed up my speech, and I didn't even have a printer. So I had to have the director print it out. And I got up there, and it was almost like an outer body experience, because I got up there and I just said what needed to be said. And it was, even though it was a sad moment, it was the most fun I've ever had at a funeral in my life. It was absolutely representing my dad, and every single word that was on that paper was so perfect. And every everyone was like so supportive, but like I had support from my friends, from my family, from everyone. But it was the voice that was the divine guidance, because I couldn't have done it without that.
Okay, let's clarify it. When you say the voice, did it really sound? I had it in my life as a clarion. I could describe it as a clarion voice, or it was a thought, maybe bursted into your space, or it just knowing. What type of, just for specifics of it?
I always get a whisper, and it may sound strange to someone, but it's the sweetest whisper that I hear. And that's whenever I know it's the right thing, because it's, to me, whenever someone whispers, it's so kind and so loving, and it's not screaming at me. It's not like bells and whistles. I'm already dramatic enough. I don't need my signs to be dramatic. I need it to be calm, to keep me calm. And it works perfectly. So whenever I heard that whisper, I was like, this is exactly where I need to be, and exactly what I need to do for my family and for my dad.
And when that whisper came, what did it say?
It just said, you need to write. You need to write. So I started
Teaching points here. First is, this is the difference between the ego-based sign or ego-based sound or voice, and the whisper and the inner voice. The difference is you perfectly described. The ego-based would be obnoxious. Ego speaks to us obnoxiously in a loud manner. I have also, well, obviously I have experience, we all experienced it, loud, and it will be just so forceful. And yeah,
exactly.
we can hear it clearly. And we got used to following it. On the other side, the whisper will be non-assuming. It's not attached if you continue doing it or not, or if you do it or not, but it will be persistent in a
Right.
very small, subtle, beautiful way,
Yes.
comforting way. So that's the difference.
It was pure love is the best way that I can describe it. So whenever I heard it, it was the most loving message, just saying, help, like, help, you need to do this. And I didn't even second guess it one time. I was just like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I did.
And because you followed divine guidance voice, everything was in the divine guidance flow, right? I call it green light flow. Could
Absolutely.
you give us an example of green light flow, how you experienced it?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, because I was going to say that earlier about the green lights, because that's one of my favorite things. So as I was, right whenever I got the call, I was literally still driving. I had to pick my daughter up at the airport, and I was driving. Well, I had to go through all these little tiny towns where because it's rural Missouri, and there's like one stoplight in each one of them, and the speed limit's about 30. It's very you know, you have to go very slow. Every single town I went through, and I'm talking to the gentleman on the phone, every single light I got was green. And that's how I know that exactly what was happening was the divine plan of what needed to happen, and everything was falling into place exactly the way it was supposed to.
It was effortless. You
Yeah,
didn't need to struggle. You didn't need to fight. You didn't need to push over mountains, overcome mountains, climb mountains, because everything was guided, supported, and everything was happening. And
exactly.
divine setup was as such setup that you it wasn't just because the minister disappeared or the second one disappeared, right? It was experience for you because you needed to do it.
Correct. Yes. It's very beautiful whenever you look at that. And in any situation, there can be bad and there can be good, and it's our responsibility to find the good. And that's where our signs come in, because if you're really looking for them and paying attention to them, they're letting you know that you're exactly on the right path that you're supposed to be on.
Doing the right thing at the right
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay, and what other signs did you get during the story? Because you told me there was a lot of signs.
Yes. So one of my very favorites was, it was after I had gotten back to Texas and I just decided to go on a little mini vacation. It was when we did our last video. Um, but my friend was with me and she has always resisted any of this, just like I had in the past, any kind of signs, any kind of enlightenment, really. She's not there. So we were walking over to a restaurant and I always point to feathers. And I said, look, there's a feather. It's a blessing. Walked a few more steps. There's a blessing. It was on, and you taught me about feathers. So there's another one. And it always reminds me that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And that's God telling me that I'm right on the right path, because the blessings are right there. And he's letting me know I'm doing whatever I'm thinking of, whatever I'm doing at the moment, I'm right where I belong. So we're seeing feathers everywhere. And I had told her during the video, she had heard the example of the tree. When we were walking back into our hotel, she looked up at the hotel. We were staying at the DoubleTree, and she saw the tree trunks. And she's like, oh my gosh, look. And she was dealing with a huge issue at the moment. So she was like, there's my sign. And it just made my heart feel so happy. But my favorite thing that happened to her that weekend, we were in the swimming pool and there were feathers all over. We were on the beach, so there's birds everywhere, but there were feathers like galore. And we were in the pool, and all of a sudden, all these feathers like came floating right at her and made almost like a life ring around her waist. And I said, oh my gosh, you are completely surrounded in blessings. And she's like, I am. And she looked up and there's one floating down from the sky. And she said, if I jumped, I could catch that blessing. And it was so neat to me. And to see, just like you've done for me, you've taught me so delicately and so kindly and so calmly. And I did the same thing with her, even though I wanted her to see the signs, to do it out of straight love. it that's whenever it resonates with people.
Wow, very, very nice story. And you have witnessed the time of transformation for your friend because she was a complete muggle, we could say, right? Like you were before. And then
Absolutely.
it was the moment of transformation when she started seeing the signs. So that was the first step forward into the very different realm.
Well, I always say that I thank you all the time, because I feel like, because you helped guide me, I feel like you gave me new eyes to see the world. And I feel like I got to witness that with my girlfriend while we were standing right there in the parking lot, and that light just went off and I got to witness that. And I can only imagine how much love you felt at that time, because that's how I felt. I just felt so full of love and so full of joy.
Right. And it's a ripple effect.
Yes.
Ripple effect. Yeah.
And I can't wait for her to spread it.
Right. Exactly. Okay, well, since we promised the story about the funeral, let's go back to the funeral.
Okay,
because you did have more signs during that time. So it is a critical time. It
right.
cannot be waited. You have to do it a specific time. It involves people. So what the other signs did you? Because I know you had the signs there.
There were signs everywhere, and honestly, like a lot of them were in the moment that I might not even necessarily remember right now, but it's exactly what I needed. But just the people coming, and even the songs that we played, they were not traditional funeral songs. We did silly songs because it represented my dad so perfectly. And it literally did not feel like a funeral. It felt like a funeral. And that's what I used to kept saying that,
Celebration.
excuse me.
Celebration.
Yeah, yes, it absolutely was. And that's all part of living. Like we all die and it's part of it. And yes, it's sad, but it was a great example to set for all of my family, my nieces and my nephews and my kids, for them to see that it doesn't necessarily have to be so hard and so sad. You can find the light in every single thing. And even the songs that we played, like they were silly, they were fun, and the messages that came after, the people who came to speak to us, and it was just very, very beautiful.
Do you have some kinds of sounds there? Is it the cat? I hope it's your cat.
So sorry, they are doing weed eating right outside my window.
Oh, I hope it's your cat. I wanted to see the kitty.
No, he actually lives in San Diego with Gabby now,
Oh,
because otherwise he would be right here in front of
right,
us.
right, right. That's why I said, oh, maybe the cat is walking around, so he could
Maybe
give
he's
us a
here.
sign.
Maybe he's here in spirit. It's funny. I was thinking he was here earlier, even though he hasn't lived here for almost a year. But I was dragging a cord because it had fallen, so I was going down the stairs, and he would usually try to grab it.
Oh,
I mean, was a flood of signs. Like every corner that I was looking, and the people that I spoke to, some of the conversations that I had, it was unbelievable, all the signs that were coming. And the green lights were everywhere. But even with my dad dying, signs still came even after he left. I realized that a lot of our our relationship is still going to continue even in his death. Like we're still going to
we don't
continue.
die, so of course it will continue.
Exactly. So even though here on earth we had our struggles in our relationship, we had great times, we had a great relationship, but we also had our struggles. But with his death, a lot of those struggles that I have been dealing with have died away with him. And I love him for that, because even in death, he's still showing me, oh, I just got goosebumps. He's still showing me how much he loves us and how much he cared for us in every aspect of life. And just the fact that he can still give us signs even in his death, when he's not physically here, he's still here with us spiritually. He's still in my heart. Like it's very beautiful.
So, Steph, if you still continue to be a muggle, if you were not on the spiritual journey home, as we call it, if you did not know about spiritual divine guidance science, and the funeral happened at the time of your mugglehood, would it be different from now?
Absolutely. It would have been awful. It would have been, number one, I would have never gotten up there. We would have probably, all of us would have struggled to figure out what to do.
You wouldn't listen to that inner voice.
No, not at all. And we would have all been so devastated that we weren't in the moment. And I'm so grateful that I got to be in that moment and enjoy it. Even though it was one of the saddest days of my life, it was also one of the most beautiful. And as I'm talking, I just remember the night before we had went up to my mom's grave, because she had already passed as well, and we were burying them right beside each other. But we took flowers up to her, and it was so neat because my family never prayed. We just never did. And when we got up there, we cleaned it off and put the flowers down. And my brother asked me to say a prayer, which was so neat because like we don't do that. But he turned to me and he said, "Well, will you say a prayer?" And he would be the last person who would ever ask. So I did, and we left. It was a great time. But the next day, when we got back to the gravesite with my dad's body, as the funeral director was saying his prayer, butterflies came and sat on my dad's flowers on top of his casket. So that is so beautiful because it was showing that this life we are all transforming, not just me but my whole family is growing, and we're all changing in different ways, and it's so beautiful to watch. I have now since had conversations with one of my baby sisters who is just barely starting to get there. And in the past, she was a muggle. She was so negative, and to see the light shining through her, and she was the one who noticed the butterflies the first, which is absolutely, it's just breathtaking to me. And it's a little overwhelming. Like it's beautiful.
Wow. Okay, and the last question, the whole importance of divine guidance science in your life. Would you right now, because you know and you've used divine guidance and you practice it and implement it for so many years by now, right? Would you, if I would say, okay, stop having it and just no divine guidance anymore, what would you say?
You can't take it away. It's like learning to ride a bike. You couldn't tell me to stop knowing how,
Right,
because once you know, and once you know what to look for, you can't stop it. Like you're there. And sure, we all go through times where we may not be on this level, we may be here, but it's okay because this is just as beautiful as up here. So even if you go through a hard time, remember to stay true to yourself, and you'll you'll get out of it. It's okay. And love every single moment and every single breath that you get, and pay attention to your signs, because usually whenever you do slip on the downhill slope, that's whenever you get the biggest signs. But sometimes your mind is so closed. So you have to remember to ask for your mind to be open and to open your heart.
right. One of my friends, and I know we need to stop, but I want one more question. One of my friends said, who is a complete muggle, and she knows it, and she said, "Oh, it must be hard to constantly look for signs. Your life must be so hard to constantly look for signs." And I laugh because I look at it the opposite way, right? Because it's
Yes.
life as a muggle, it's not hard life as for us because science encourage, uplift, help, guide. I mean, all the make decisions, help make decisions and so forth. And so, what would you say? Which part do you think hard life with science or without science?
Oh my gosh, absolutely without. And what my favorite thing out of all this that I've ever learned is I know that I was this way for, I'm sure I was this way for you. I was this way for other people in my life. But whenever someone isn't paying attention to their signs and they're just walking through life, going through the motions, um, I feel like those people are usually the ones who drain me the most. Like they physically drain my energy, they drain mentally, physically, emotionally. I get drained by hanging out with them because they're not they're not being true to their self. They're not being intentional of what they really want in life. So instead of saying it's got to be hard for you, they could say, I want to learn how to do this. Like, how can I do this so my life can be easier? And I can understand the resistance because I've been on that side. And I did think like, this is there's no way that everything can be a sign. Absolutely. Whenever you're getting signs, I understand how people on the outside looking in, whenever I'm like, this is a sign, a bunch of my shoes broke. I mean, I had 7 pairs of shoes break one day or one week. And I know the people around me probably thought I was some kind of crazy person or I just bought really cheap shoes. But it is important to pay attention. And yes, absolutely.
Yeah. that would be another conversation. This because it's a advanced yoga move, because we will go into the very deep spiritual truths about why we need to pay attention to the whole reality around us. So thank you so much. But it was great to hear your real life experience with science, and I know you've been using them and implementing them, as I said. So it's not theory for you; it's
Right.
the real deal.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me share. I hope I answered your questions.
Of course you did. Thank you, everyone.